Hello, everyone, and welcome to OneSpatial's FME Accelerator, a brand new micro training session we are running in conjunction with the software vendor, Safe Software, where we're going to be showing you how you can maximize your data and minimize your efforts. If you don't have it enabled already, please ensure that the follow presenter option that is visible in the top left-hand side of your screen is selected, as this will allow you to easily follow the slideshow during the training session. I'm just getting a message that my audio is not fantastic. Hopefully Strigo settles down a little bit. Okay. So, sorry about that. Let's continue. Let's meet the presenters for today. For those who don't know me, I actually see a few people in the chat who I do recognize, but for those who don't know me, my name's Samuel McDonald. I'm one of the engineers working at OneSpatial Australia and one of the senior consultants. Additionally, I am the training manager here at OneSpatial. I compose and deliver the vast majority of our training, and thus that is why I am here and you're looking at my face right now. Additionally, we have Andrew Bashfield, our sales manager, who will be concluding our training session later on. And I think, Andrew, if you just want to quickly.
Yeah. Hi, Sam. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the event. I'm looking forward to catching up with you a little bit later.
Thank you, Andrew. And additionally, I have Simon Laird and James Butterill from our technical team who are here to answer any questions that you may have in the chat window, which I'll be showing you shortly as well. I'm sure everyone will have tons of questions, so let's keep these guys on their toes. Before we begin, let's quickly review our agenda for today. I will begin with some housekeeping for this session. Then there are 4 sections that we're going to cover. The first section is about data integration and why it's important for modern organizations. Secondly, we will show you how to connect to your data using the ETL design tool, FME Workbench. That's why we're all here. After that, we will discuss how to transform and convert your data to meet your needs. And finally, we will provide a quick introduction into automating your workflows with FME Server. So, some housekeeping. And the first bit of housekeeping I need to do is I just need to preemptively warn everyone. Unfortunately, I do have a bit of a cough. So if you hear me, well, don't hear me because I've muted myself just to quickly cough. I do apologize in advance. You might see me just taking a quick sip of my drink too. So my apologies in advance for that. Now, the real housekeeping. This is a 90-minute event, ideally. And as I mentioned, it's actually a brand new event for us and a fairly new event for the software vendor themselves. So first and foremost, feedback is always encouraged and it's honestly appreciated. We are hosting this session on a platform called Strigo. You'd probably guess that because you had to sign up to a platform called Strigo, which will provide you with your own interactive FME lab from within your browser. You will not need your own copy of FME. Even if you've got your own copy of FME, you honestly don't need to use it. We advise that you use this one. Just use it within your browser. That's all you need because we like to keep things nice and simple for our attendees. We'll keep these interactive FME labs that we have for Strigo alive for an extra 15 minutes after the end of the session as well, so that if you do want to hang around after the official end and finish anything that you missed, tinker, review, or even ask us questions, you are more than welcome to hang around. And additionally, we are recording this session and we'll provide said recording after we conclude the training and we have an opportunity to clean it up for you a little bit. Okay, continuing with housekeeping, let me give you a little bit of an introduction to Strigo before we get started. On the left, you should be able to see the navigation pane. This shows the different sections of the course that you, as an attendee, will have access to. We will just be using 2 of them today. The first being the top one on the navigation pane. That is the slides button. It's a button that looks like a whole heap of slides on top of each other, which will allow you to see the slide deck. Fairly simple. The second one is the cloud symbol with the little beaker on it. And this is called My Lab, which is the section that you will want to go to when it comes time to access your FME lab. You can independently swap between these two as required. And regardless of whether you are in your lab or looking at the slides, I may be continuing with my presentation. If we're not doing if I haven't stopped till they do an exercise, I'll probably continue with my presentation and continue what I'm doing. And if you want to return to viewing my screen, if you've strayed from my screen, which is fine, Strigo is interesting and you want to click all the buttons, just make sure you click that you click that follow presenter button again, and you'll come back to my screen and what I am doing. Now, if you do happen to have any trouble with audio or video in Strigo, and it does happen unfortunately ever so often, there is a question mark button at the bottom left of the screen that can help you with that. Now, if you do happen to have the session freeze up and my audio or video drops, honestly, the easiest starting point is just refresh your browser to give it a swift kick back into gear. At the top right, if you hadn't guessed it, I am your instructor, your presenter. Hopefully I'm here in the top right hand side of your screen, waving at you right now. Hello. And below me, the man making all the noise, is the chat pane where you can talk to the public chat. And if people just want to throw in a hello and say hello to the group, welcome to the FME Accelerator, you're more than welcome to, just so that I know that people have found that chat pane. And additionally, if you're interested, there is a menu bar at the top right of the chat where you can change it to private message people instead, direct message them. If you want to message one of our teaching assistants privately, James or Simon, who will be marked with a TA, this is how you can do so. As mentioned, the follow presenter icon is at the top left, which is what you want to select if you want to see my screen. And the My Lab button is at the bottom of the navigation pane if you want to go to your FME lab. Additionally, there is a raise hand button that you may use to get our attention if you want us to DM you, or I might use it during polls. But aside from that, really, if you want to get our attention and ask a question, it's easier just to put it directly in the chat. That's the most straightforward way to get your question answered. And we do encourage people to ask the questions. That's part of the experience. Now, on the topic of the lab, here is what it will look like when you are in there. It is a virtual machine running in the cloud that just happens, luckily, to have FME installed on it, which will enable you to use FME as part of today's session. A couple of notes about this virtual machine, however. It can be a little tricky to copy and paste between your local machine and this virtual machine. If you do need to copy and paste between them, there is a text box that you can open up to place your text in to make it accessible to both. It's in that top left-hand side. If you happen to run into any catastrophic issues, there is a call assistance button at the top right-hand side that will put you in a queue to be attended by one of our teaching assistants. I humbly ask that you only use this if you really need to, as we have a large number of people online today and a finite number of resources to assist you. Most of the time, a direct message or a message in chat will be enough to get your problem solved fairly quickly. Finally, if you're lucky and happen to have multiple monitors and want to take full advantage of them, there is the Open External Lab button to pop your lab into its own window. I have 3 monitors in front of me, and I'm a big advocate of using as much space as I can. Now, continuing on with the lab, it isn't shown in this image, but there will also be a pane to the left-hand side of the left-hand side of the lab where you're working that will actually contain the instructions for your exercises today. If this isn't open when you are in your FME lab, there should be an arrow which is got the square bar around it in the picture that will allow you to expand it, to reveal it from the left-hand side. And additionally, if you are having any trouble with the screen being too small, please note the following keyboard shortcuts that can help rectify that. So, I think that's enough housekeeping. We'll get on to the real reason that we're here. Why data integration? This section is designed to help you understand what the technical value of the FME platform is and why is FME the best tool for your data integration needs. But before we really jump into it, I have a question for everyone. So we're going to start with a quick poll here. We don't have a specific section for you to answer polls, unfortunately, but feel free to put your answer in the chat window. A lot of organizations face data challenges around data integration, and being a consultant that tries to help resolve data challenges for organizations, I'm very curious what data integration challenges do face your organizations. So if in the chat you could put a answer here or any combination of the answers, it can be all, it can be none. I'm very curious to see what the things are that stand out to people as their biggest pain points, their biggest difficulties when it comes to data integration. So I'll give it just a second to see that. And I'll attempt to keep up with the chat as it all comes in. Yeah, it's quite a lot of answers. Yeah, excellent. I'm seeing, I think B and C are possibly the most reoccurring ones. So incompatible systems, the difficulty of enabling interoperability between systems is definitely always problematic, and slower manual processes is always a painful one as well. Having to manually run arduous tasks over and over and over. No one likes it. So thank you very much, everyone, for sharing. I'm always interested to know. I do this in our full training as well, where I start talking about something and then I go to the group and go, who gets annoyed by these elements and do you want to solve it now? So let's continue. Because we find on this topic of problems that face organizations, there are, from our perspective, a variety of problems that organizations and individuals face that FME can help with. These problems can include, but not limited to, problems like or issues related to timely or real-time access to data quality, data variety, volume and interoperability, the ability or inability to connect enterprise systems, whether they're legacy or new or a blend of both, and that's not uncommon. You got limited resources in IT and you need to preserve them. You need to process spatial and location data that might be out of the norm for you. You've got manual and inefficient processes that you really want to get rid of. All of these are things that, if they sound like they're problematic to you, FME might be of interest. And why this is important is that we believe that data is the most critical business asset for any organization. And in order to serve your customers, your clients, your citizens, and even yourselves, you need to be making data-driven decisions. And this is where the concept of enterprise integration comes in. This is a topic that I talk about a lot. This diagram that you see on the screen is designed to show you let's call it a fairly common group or blend of systems that you as an organization might interact with. You may be using cloud-based storage. You may be connected to the Internet of Things. You may be using a myriad of enterprise systems that you are dealing with that may be provided with Microsoft, or Esri is a common one, Google, and so on. You may have databases from Oracle, Snowflake, Postgres, Sapanas, lots of options. You might be using spatial data, or perhaps you're using social media data. Perhaps you've got on-premise data. The issue is that by default, the majority of these disparate systems and data sets won't be able to directly communicate with each other, and the interoperability of them can be such a challenge. That's why one of the most recurring answers in that poll was about systems not communicating, the difficulty of systems communicating. This is where enterprise integration comes in, which is effectively a layer that sits between your systems and users to merge and bring together all your data when it is needed. And this term integration is multifaceted and can include data integration, bringing your files and folders together, application integration, enabling direct communications between applications, data quality assurance, so performing the integrity and validity, confirming the integrity and validity of your data, and workflow automation so that your processes do not have to be manually executed. All options that if you are not currently doing should be of interest. Apologies, quick sip of the drink. And so here at One Spatial, in conjunction with Safe Software, our mission is to help you maximize the value of your data, which can be accomplished through enterprise integration. Now, another quick visual aid. This is just a small sampling of the different systems supported by FME, with a strong focus on asset management, business intelligence, databases, and open data, and many more. And I would venture a guess that almost everyone in this chat will see one of these and go, I have an interest in that. And if you've got an interest in something specific, you may ask in the chat. I see one that says map info. Absolutely, FME supports map info. And in fact, FME is able to read and write from over 450 different formats, systems, and services, including tabular and spatial data. Now, I do like the visual aid, so I'm going to keep going with this, because this is a really good graphic that shows FME's continual progression into supporting an increasingly wide range of different data types. Now, Safe Software, the software vendor, started FME in the 90s as a primarily CAD, which is computer-aided design or drafting, and GIS, Geospatial Information Systems tool, specifically an interoperability tool. But over the years, support for a huge range of different data types and formats has been introduced. And you have things like support for tabular data, for databases, for XML, for raster, BIM data, which is immensely popular, point clouds, cloud data, IoT, gaming. If anyone's interested, there's a Minecraft reader and writer in there. It supports so many things. And the product of this continual integration is that you have a high level of confidence, or you should have a high level of confidence, that FME will support your requirements. And if you happen to fall into the niche that FME doesn't support you, well, you can be sure that it's just around the corner. Minecraft's not, I see a quick comment says, but not tell my daughter about the Minecraft one. And funnily enough, it's not the only game support either. There's more in there. Compared to other integration tools, the real strength of FME is that it seamlessly brings the power of spatial data to your decision making, effortlessly connecting spatial systems and data sets to other spatial and non-spatial sets in any kind of configuration arrangement that you would like. And so on this topic, let's go to another poll. Again, because I'm just happen to be a curious fellow and I'm always interested. So, who here uses spatial data individually or as part of an organization? I'll let the answers roll in, and it's overwhelmingly in one direction. All I'm seeing is yes, we use spatial data, which is great because I'm very happy and excited to talk about spatial data. Hopefully, you're excited to hear about it. So, let's talk about why spatial data is so important, why it's so fundamental to perhaps what everyone here does. And one thing that perhaps the majority of people here, not everyone has noticed, is that for decades, spatial data really was the realm of the GIS department in most organizations. But what we are seeing is that more and more vendors and departments are recognizing the importance of spatial data. And you can see that by the fact that a lot of big names are entering into the world of spatial data, such as Amazon, Google, Tableau, IBM, and many, many more who are really starting to pay attention to and cater towards spatial data. And the thing is that with more vendors onboarding into spatial data comes more systems, and that is where FME really comes in, being able to help these systems communicate with one another. Again, its roots, its core conception was as an interoperability tool. And that has just evolved into something so much more. And I'm sure you're aware you can use spatial data to optimize a lot of your business decisions. So if you have customers, they live somewhere, they go somewhere, they have patterns that you can observe and use to better meet their needs. If you have assets you are tracking, such as fleet of vehicles or even just physical locations or physical clients, you are going to want to know where they are, what their condition is, and predict and improve their performance and maintenance. And perhaps if you deal with any event-based decision making, you are going to want to know where those events are happening so that you can anticipate them and respond to them in real time. All of this is powered by location data, which can be harnessed with FME. So I've said the word FME a lot. Let's actually talk about what FME is. Because FME is actually a suite of products that comprise an enterprise integration platform. The key component to get started with is FME Desktop, where you can build and run your data integration workflows, connecting your data sets and services together. This is what we will be primarily focusing on today. However, we will also be showing you FME Server, which is where you can automate those workflows. FME Server can be installed on-premise or as a cloud-based solution, which includes an easy to get started with version called FME Cloud. Additionally, there are two FME mobile products, one for augmented reality and another that acts as a client of FME Server that lets you access FME on the go. You don't even have to be sitting at your computer to be using FME. And now that we're talking about utilizing FME, I'd like to break it up into 3 key stages, which you can implement separately or combined together as part of your workflows. The first stage is connecting to your data stores, and FME supporting connecting to over 450 different formats and systems. So it makes it very, very, very easy to get connected. After you have connected, you will usually want to transform in and change your data in some manner to meet your needs. In the training that I usually deliver, I commonly refer to FME being a tool of taking what you have and changing it into what you want. I've noticed that one of my hands was off the screen there. I'm trying to put both my hands in. Taking what you have and changing it into what you want. And this is supplemented with a series of tools called transformers that enable you to accomplish this in a really intuitive visual drag and drop interface. And finally, you are going to want to automate those workflows that you don't have to be manually triggered, instead being triggered on a schedule or from some event. And so we are going to work through these 3 sections today, and we're going to do that by looking at a real life data integration scenario. We have these FME labs for a reason. We might as well get in and start using FME. This scenario we've got is based on some open data from Vancouver in British Columbia, Canada, which is very close to where the software vendor Safe Software is based. They're based in Surrey, British Columbia, and it revolves around a few different data sets. Firstly, we have the location and business information of food vendors, specifically food trucks. Secondly, we have data on upcoming road construction projects, so which roads are going to be affected by construction. And finally, we have business license information that is tabular only. And what we want to do is we want to connect that to the food vendors, the spatial-based food vendors set, to enrich that data set. And what we are going to do, what we're going to try and do at least, is anticipate what food vendors may be impacted by upcoming road construction and alert them. So we're going to create a list of food vendors that need to be alerted. Hey, if you're working on this street, it's not going to be available at these times. You might want to change your course. It may sound like a challenging problem, but it's dead simple with FME. And so that first step was to connect our data. We're going to work through those 3 sections, but we have to start with connecting our data and how FME can help connect to those 3 data sets that we just discussed. My apologies. So the process of connecting to data in FME is really straightforward. You start with your source data, perhaps something like an Excel spreadsheet, that's a popular one, and you add an object called a reader to FME Workbench. The software we'll be primarily using today, FME Workbench being the developer tool. A reader tells FME how to interpret and read in a particular dataset. In its simplest form, you will tell FME what format it is, or it can even guess if you want, and where it is located, and FME will do the work for you. And when you add a reader to FME Workbench, it will appear in an area called the Navigator. And I'll show you the Navigator when we get into the FME lab. Readers generate what we call reader feature types, and these are the objects that will appear on the canvas. Another component I'll show you very soon. And what these feature types do is that they allow us to visualize the input and flow of data. It will make more sense once we have this visual aid in front of us. Now, these feature types correspond to a layer of data, which in this case for Excel would be one of the sheets in the Excel workbook, but it can also correspond to a table in database if you're an Esri user, a feature class in a geodatabase, a layer in a CAD drawing, and so on and so forth. And so what you can do is you can then go and build your workflow after you've read your data in visually on the canvas. Canvas, I always joke, canvas is where you paint your picture, where you paint your workflow. And there's a generalization on the canvas. You'll have on the left-hand side where data is read in from, and data flows from that left-hand side right through to the right-hand side. And as it flows through, it moves through a series of blue blocks on the canvas, which we refer to as transformers that transform the data, and is eventually written out on the right-hand side of the canvas. We facilitate this flow of data by dragging these little connections that you can see, these little lines between the objects of the canvas to interconnect them. And for this one that you see on the screen, it's pretty straightforward. It's reading in a Esri geodatabase. It's just reading in a couple of the feature classes. And what it's doing is it's actually buffering some of the records coming in. So that's actually making the geometry bigger. And then it's doing a spatial check. So basically where it's doing some kind of spatial relationship between the two of them. We don't know what that test is, but it is doing some kind of test. And we'll actually talk about how to have a look at what these transformers are doing. So this brings us to our first exercise, where we're going to be showing you how to work with FME. These exercises are designed to be interactive, so you will get an opportunity to play with the software yourself in an introductory capacity. I'll jump into it first, run through it, then I'll hand it over to you to run through as well. And so I'm going to move over to my lab now. And when you're in the lab, it might just need a second to get started. Or mine might not get started. That's quite funny. I'll just quickly go and make sure mine's going to boot up. Double check it. There it is. Okay, sorry about that. Sometimes they do take a little moment to get started. It's a little bit luck of the draw. And we do have so many spinning up. So when you're in your lab, it will look something like this. Now, the very first thing I need to note is that for that notification on the right-hand side around the networks, you can just click yes. It doesn't matter at all. You can just get rid of that. And so this is what you'll be looking at, your FME workbench. Now, what we're looking at currently is what we call a workspace, which is what we would build with FME Workbench, and that defines how you want to integrate your data, this workbench, this workspace, sorry. So FME Workbench is the software we're using, and the file that we've got open is referred to as a workspace. Now, these workspace files themselves are actually quite small. They're just basically a text product, a script that describes the workflow that you're looking at visually. So it's just a text file, but FME knows how to render it as a visual environment. And fortunately, we already have one set up for you. We don't expect you to create these out of the blue because we're on a time constraint here. So we're going to be using this one as an example and going through it. So before we get started, let's review this workbench very quickly. On the left-hand side, I might just drag this down a little bit very quickly just to make a little more space. And I'll move that bit. Okay, on the left-hand side, as I mentioned, data flows from left to right. So on the left-hand side, we have where our data is coming in. Now, this little block here is what we refer to as a bookmark. This is basically a container that just allows us to neaten up our workbenches. We'll be talking about them as we go. And we can see that there are these reader feature types that I just mentioned. And in fact, there are 3 of them in total. So that makes sense because I said that we had 3 data sets. We have our upcoming road construction projects. We have our food vendors, which is not actually obvious, and we'll talk about that. And we have our business licenses right here. So that's our 3 data sets. In the middle, going through from left to right, are all those blue objects that we call transformers, which are carrying out a number of analytic or transformation steps to generate what we want. Like I said, taking what we have and producing what we want. And what we want is what food vendors are going to be impacted by road construction. And then moving further to the right, we have the other side where the data is being written out. And this is a Excel report. So create a report in Excel. So that is our writer feature type, which will produce an Excel spreadsheet. And in that Excel spreadsheet will be our affected food vendors. So for this first step, what we want to figure out is where our data is coming from. And to do so, we're going to go back to the reader feature types. Now, I mentioned that there was a canvas and there was a navigator. Where all these objects are that I'm scrolling through, that is the canvas. Your visual flow is on the canvas. On the left-hand side to the canvas is the navigator. It's the part that has navigator at the top of it. Because readers live in the navigator and the reader feature types live on the canvas. And so if you want to actually understand where a data set is being read from, you need to reference the navigator. And what we can do, for example, is I could select the business licenses one on the canvas, and I'm going to do that. And you'll see that it highlights something in the navigator on the left-hand side. This business license is highlighted, this CSV file. So we have 2 CSV files and we have a shape file. What we can do is we can click the arrow to expand the parameters of this reader. And you'll see there's a whole heap of options here. And we don't have time to go through everything. But the key one that you're interested in is that there is a source CSV parameter. And if we go and hover over this, if we hover over it, you will see that it actually tells us the full path of our data. So it's sitting on a folder called FME Data 2022 Resources FME Accelerator does the business licenses.zip. So it's actually a zip file. It's reading it directly out of a zip file. But the key takeaway here is that this is reading the CSV from a local machine. So what we're going to do is I'm going to hand it over to you to work through now. So I'll turn off my camera for a few minutes, so 3 to 5 minutes. I'll let you jump into my lab. And just to remind you, that is the button that is the cloud with the beaker. When you're in there, you should see the instructions on the left-hand side. Work through the exercise. Please ask if you've got any problems or concerns, and we will then pick it back up after this exercise when you've had a few minutes to work on it. So please do work on the exercise now, and we will pick back up momentarily. Okay. I think everyone's had a bit of an opportunity to work through the exercise. Just quickly to say, if you happen to not finish it, don't stress. That's perfectly fine because, as I mentioned, we will have that time at the end of this to go through anything that you did miss, to ask any questions, to finalize anything that you do want to finalize. It is a very micro session, this one. It's a very quick session and fast session. So just go ahead. So don't feel bad if you don't quite get there. And just to answer your question, Katie, yes, we're only doing the first exercise, slide 1. So just the reading data exercise. You're welcome to jump through them if you want to blast through them. But if you want to wait for me to talk about each one, we'll address a slide at a time, each one. Okay, let us continue onwards. And a quick reminder to everyone to click that follow presenter button if you haven't already. If you're in your lab and you want to see my screen again, you will need to click that follow presenter button in the top left hand corner. It's a bit of a pesky button. You'll be finding yourself coming back to it a fair bit. Okay, so let's go ahead and talk about how we can view our data. Now that you've got a bit of a taste on how you can connect to your data, you might want to know how you can view that data. And it's a very important part of using your data, reviewing it to make sure it looks correct, that it's valid, that it has integrity. These are all very important considerations. Sorry, a tickle in my throat there. So when you run a workspace in FME, it actually caches an image of your data at every step of the workflow on each object on the canvas. This enables you to see what your source data looks like, what your output data looks like, and even the data that as it's changing in each individual step, every single transform, every single object. It's really powerful. This function is referred to as feature caching. Populated feature caches are marked with the little green magnifying icons, and you'll see that in the slide on that left-hand reader, or the reader feature type, sorry. Clicking on this little icon will preview the data for you, which is very handy whilst you are authoring your workflows to ensure that your data is just as you expect. This feature cache will be opened up in a tool we call Visual Preview, which is a window within FME Workbench that will allow you to quickly view your data as tabular, 2D, or even 3D. So I'm going to jump back into the lab and show you how this works. I say in training, I'm all about hands-on. I don't like too much talking about the slides. I like to get my hands on something and do it in front of people. So, it just came out and went back in. So the first thing that we need to do is we need to run this translation. And if you want to run one of your workflows, it's very simple. There's a big green button at the top that says run. So we're going to go ahead and click that run button, and this will go ahead and run. And there's a couple of things to note while this is happening. The first thing is that down the bottom, I need to drag it back out a little bit, you'll see this text scrolling here. This is the translation log. This is effectively a running log of this translation. So we refer to translation as an active run. That is basically giving us all the information about everything that's happening. So if you ever run into issues, you have warnings or errors, they're going to be very helpful for actually identifying what has gone wrong. The next thing to note is that now we have these little numbers on our feature connections. And you'll see, for example, we have 74 here and we have 91 here. These are what we refer to as a feature count. A feature is effectively a single record and includes the tabular data and geometric data that may be a part of a record. Any record, any feature can have tabular and or geometry. It can be a combination of both or one or the other. It is really these features that we tend to focus on when working with FME, as they are the representation of our data. And like I said, data is the most valuable thing. For example, now we know that we actually have 74 features coming from our road construction shapefile, which means that there's 74 road segments with data about their construction. And knowing that this is the food vendor reader, we know that we've got 91 food vendors, for example, which are point locations with tabular data. And so if we want to actually inspect any one of these, we can very simply click on the magnifying glass. And when you do, it'll actually start to populate it in the bottom, which is your visual preview. And so this visual preview can be really, really, really powerful. And by default, what it'll give you is on the left-hand side, it will give you your tables. So what the tabular data is of this data set. And on the right-hand side, it gives the geometry. It'll actually overlay the geometry. And in this case, it's even adding a background map because we've got that enabled by default. So you can see this, you're going to see that this data is in Vancouver because the background map's been aligned. Now, it doesn't stop there. You can even hold control and click other ones to add additional data sets. So for example, if I wanted to add my food vendors, I'll just hold control and click the CSV as well. And that's just, it might have been hard to see, but we can zoom in and we should be able to see both the roads and the food vendors. So there will be lines for roads and points for food vendors. It's taking a little moment to zoom in. And the window is a little small, I'm sorry. It's a bit of a juggling match between working area in the workbench and the Strigo UI. So we can zoom in a bit, and what we should be able to see, if it lets me zoom in anymore, it's thinking about it for a second, sorry. Yeah, it might be a little hard to see, but what we can actually, what we have is we have points and we have roads. And that's coming from two data sets being selected and being inspected. And we have a whole heap of tools to work with this geographic data. We can view it in 2D or 3D. We can select them. We can pan around, zoom in, zoom out. If you're using 3D data, you can orbit. And if I select it, and for example, select this road, the really cool thing is that whenever I select a object in the geometry window, I get the related tabular data. It's highlighted immediately. If I click this point, it jumps to a point in here. If I click on this road again, it goes back to that. And the other is true as well. If I click on these, it actually highlights the geometry that that's related to. So it's very easy to actually figure out these relationships in the inspector. It's very easy to come in here and start looking at your data very, very quickly. And when you've got multiple ones selected like this, if you want to swap between them, because we have two data sets selected, we have our shapefile and we have our CSV, the road constructions and the food vendors respectively, you can drop this little drop down here and swap between the CSV, which will have all my CSVs, all my food vendors. So information around the vendor type, the status, the business name, location, or going to the roads, we'll have information relating to the location, the completion date, URL link. So different tabular content for different data sets. And so I'm going to now hand this back over to everyone. So this will be exercise 2, slide 2. So go ahead and jump into this lesson as well, lesson 2 for viewing data. I'll give you a few minutes to do it, and then we will pick it up again and go into our next topic. And please, if you run into any problems or have any questions, don't hesitate to ask. I'll give everyone a few minutes and then we'll pick it up from there. Alrighty. I think that's been a bit of time for everyone to run through the exercise. Again, if you didn't quite finish it, that's fine. And I see we've got an open question. There is an answer coming to that. So let us continue onwards, and we'll move into our next step. And just to, well, I'll quickly reiterate for Katie, just when it says click the cache, it's referring to clicking the green magnifying glass that you'll have. So to click the cache is the green magnifying glass. That's the cache data that you want to click to inspect very specifically. No problem. Okay, so let's continue onwards and upwards. And as always, I'm going to remind everyone, if you haven't clicked it and you want to see what I'm doing, please click that follow presenter button, that pesky little button. Okay. The next thing we're going to talk about is writing your data. Writing your data actually works in a very similar fashion to reading it, in the sense that just like the reader, you will add a writer to your workflow that you will specify the format and destination for. This writer will appear in the navigator, just like the reader, and the writers can actually generate any number of writer feature types, which will be the different layers, the different sheets, tables, and such of your output dataset, depending on what the output dataset is. Now, these could be completely new. The output does not have to exist. We can create a completely new output, or we can actually add to an existing output. So they can be existing layers or existing tables. And these individual feature types are what will appear on the canvas. Now, FME is very flexible when it comes to writer, and it'll actually allow you to write to local files, to databases, to web services, just to name a few different options. So let's jump back into the lab and go into writing data. I'll give a bit of a rundown and then I'll hand it over for lesson 3. My lab likes to do this every time I come back to it. There we go. So looking at the navigator on the left hand side, and I'll just quickly expand it out and I'll compress my reader. Looking at the navigator on the left hand side, you can actually identify the readers and the writers fairly simply by the directionality of their little arrows. You'll notice they've all got little arrows on them. Readers have an arrow that's coming out of a data silo because it's extracting the data, whereas writers have an arrow going into the data silo because it's inserting the data. Additionally, writers, just a little tidbit, writers will always appear after the readers in the navigator. The top 3 are readers, and that 4th one at the bottom of them is a writer. Now, if we go to the right-hand side of the flow, which is where we expect to see our writer, there it is. There is our writer as well, the writer feature type. And if I click on that, it highlights the writer in the navigator, so we can see the relationship there. Now, what we can tell immediately is that the output's going to be called affected vendors, and the format of the output is an XLSXW, which is a Excel document. The W stands for write. So that's the initial information we've got, but we can get additional information as well if we go ahead and expand this, just like we did with the readers, and we can see that there is a destination address for this. And if I hover over it again, we can see that we're writing to an output called FME Data 2022, output training, and then that Excel spreadsheet. So ultimately, we're going to be writing a new Excel file that's writing to our local local machine that is going to be called affected vendors. So what we can do is we can have a look at that output. And the convenient thing here is that we've actually already run this workbench, so we should have already actually produced that output file. So the output that we've produced at the moment, just as a quick disclaimer, we haven't finished this workflow entirely. The output at the moment, if you have a look at this feature connection here, is actually connected directly to the food vendor's CSV. So it's actually, the output is just the input, it's a pass-through. but we're going to fix that as part of one of the upcoming exercises. But just to demonstrate that you can review your data, what we can do is that we can click on the rider, and there's a couple of options above the rider that you've got, and there's this little one with the folder here, open containing folder. So you can actually open this to have it bring you to the folder where your file lives, and you'll see that we have that affected vendors.xlsx, the Excel document. Now, OpenOffice is on these machines, so if you do want to have a look at it, you're more than welcome to, but there'll be a couple of prompts you have to go through just to get it opened up. Additionally, if you want to inspect the data directly, instead of opening it up in Excel, you can inspect it in FME. You just click this little magnifying glass that says view written data, and that will actually pass it to the visual preview directly, and you can see it there as well. So those are both options for you. So same deal as before. I'm going to go ahead and hand this over to everyone to explore on your own machines. I'll give you 3 to 5 minutes, and once you've had a chance, we'll then pick it back up on the next section. So please get stuck into it and let us know if you have any questions. We are here to help. And this is, to reiterate, lesson 3, write data. Okay, we'll get back into it. I've just noticed a couple of people just mentioned they've closed their canvas, so I can quickly show how to rectify that. So if you've closed your canvas or you've closed FME entirely, so you happen to click this X button and close it entirely, do not stress. What you can do is that you can just click the FME button at the bottom, the FME workbench button, and then once that opens up again, you should find that the actual workbench that you're after is in the recently opened files list. We'll just wait for FME Desktop to open back up. It might take a second. And you'll see Here, that we have the food vendors start workbench. Just click on that, and you should be right back to where you were. So do not stress. You haven't lost it all. It's still there. Okay, we'll continue onwards. I'll ask again, because I like repeating myself, that everyone please click that follow presenter button if you want to see what I'm doing and follow along. And I'm just being mindful of the time, so I'm going to try and keep moving through this rather quickly. So, for the next section, we're going to be looking at multiple streams, which is fairly straightforward. As mentioned, you can use feature connections, which are the lines you see on the canvas, to connect your objects and control the flow of data through your workspace. These will allow you to filter your data, merge it back together, and join it by using these connections in conjunction with varying transformers. And so instead of just talking about it, again, I'm going to just looking at the chat, if the words appear broken on the slides, you might want to refresh your browser. It just might be a bit out of sync is what I'd suggest. So I'm going to jump into the lab for the next exercise, which is lesson 4, multiple streams. And it loves doing this to me. What we're going to do very quickly is we're going to have a quick look at our streams, because you can see all these feature connections flowing around, the ones that have been connected. So we see connections coming from the shapefile reader to the bufferer or the CSV, the food vendors to the attribute validator, and to the writer. There's all these feature connections. And you'll actually notice as well that a lot of these transformers have the ability to spawn lots of these. A lot of these transformers, even if they're not necessarily connected, have multiple output ports. And so as part of these one way that you can create multiple streams is you can actually use a transformer that will produce multiple outputs and use those as different streams. You basically create different states, different cases based on the output of a transformer. An example that we're going to look at very quickly, and then I'll hand it over to you, is the attribute validator transformer. So you can find this attribute validator on the left-hand side of your canvas, just after the readers, this one here. And if you want to have a look at what's in a transformer, it's very simple. All you need to do is double click it. When you double click it, this will open up the transformer. And what the attribute validator transformer does is it basically allows you to very easily define validation rules. And so this transformer has a couple of rules that it is enforcing. The first one is that the key has to be unique. So there can't be any duplicated keys. And the second one is that the business name has to have a value. It can't be null. And based on the outcome of each one of these tests, because for every feature that goes into the transformer, this test will be done. Sorry, my Strigo is jumping all over the place. My apologies, my Strigo has just stopped responding. But depending on the output of this transformer, depending on the test, if it's valid or invalid, you'll find that the output goes to the passed or the failed port, and then you're actually able to use these at your own whim. If the data is invalid, put it to the failed port, and then you're able to route that accordingly. Maybe you want to send an email to someone that says, hey, your data is not good, please update it. You can do that with FME. In response to receiving bad data, automatically annoy someone about it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hand this over to the group again. So this is lesson 4, multiple streams. Please jump into it. Have a look at the attribute validator transformer. I'll give you a few minutes and then we will jump back into it again. So please go and jump into your labs, and I'm going to quickly try and fix my lab because it's stopped responding. Sorry. Alrighty, in the interest of time, let's continue on. Um, Melissa, if you're having trouble with your machine, I'll just get one of our TAs to reboot it. So it'll just quickly get rebooted. So I will ask Simon very nicely if he could please reboot that machine for you. Excellent. Okay, continuing onwards. Let's talk about our next topic before we do. You know what I'm going to say. Click that follow presenter button so you can keep seeing what I'm doing. And let's talk about our next topic, which is documenting your workspace. So you can think of a workspace as a script if you've done any programming before, and it is a good practice to provide documentation with scripts to ensure other people who have to work with the workspace can get a fundamental understanding of it easily. FME has tools that allow you to document your workspace as you create it. One way is to use bookmarks, and you've seen that there's already a few of these in the example workspace. Bookmarks are essentially containers that allow you to surround and highlight logical blocks. They even have functional aspects to them, like they can be collapsed. Another method is annotations, which can be attached to objects or left free hanging. Annotations are effectively comment bubbles on the canvas to explain the process. You can see it in the middle on that transformer. Calculate average park size, for example. And finally, you can even set metadata in your workspace file, such as a name, description, help, version, and so on. This can be very helpful if you're sharing your workspaces internally, or even if you're coming back to your own work after a year or so and you need to remind yourself exactly what you did. Happens all the time. It's very important to have good housekeeping, regardless of what medium you're working in. And so I'm going to jump over my lab and hope my lab is alive. It is alive. It's coming back to life. Cool. And it's opening up FME for me. So for this exercise, we're going to add some annotations. We already have some bookmarks. I'm going to keep talking just while it's opening. We have already have some bookmarks, as we've seen, and some annotations, which is nice. But one thing that I specifically mentioned was that one of the readers are missing an annotation. It's not there. So it's hard to actually tell what that reader is reading in because there's two of them that say just CSV. And so what I want to do when my workbench opens up is that I want to go and find that CSV reader feature type that is not intuitive because it doesn't say food vendors. And I want to add an annotation that says food vendors. Now, I've shown you that we can click on the reader and actually figure out that it's food vendors, but ideally, you shouldn't have to ever click on it. You should be able to see it at the top level and just say, oh yeah, that's food vendors. And the problem is in its current form, you can't do that. In its current form, I can't look at this and just go, oh, that's food vendors, where I want to be able to look at this without clicking on it and say, oh, that's food vendors. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on it. This is unresponsive again. Strigo might be struggling a little bit with the numbers we've got. There we go. And what I can do is I can right click on it and then I can go add, attach annotation. And you'll see that it automatically tries to populate it with some information saying that the CSV food vendors, because it knows that it's a CSV file looking at a file called food vendors, but I'll just word it a bit nicer and say food vendors like that. And then all I need to do is click somewhere else and we're done. Now, one thing to note, we've made a change to this workspace and now you've got an option you didn't before. That save button's available to you. So you might want to click that. And you might get this saying save workspace may be an older version, just save without backup and done. So very easy exercise. I'm going to give everyone a few minutes just to do this one. So this is lesson 5, document a workspace. Please go ahead and document that CSV reader and I'll be back to go through the next step after everyone's had a chance to do this. So please get started. Lesson 5, document a workspace. Okay. We shall continue moving forward as we are pressed for time, unfortunately. I don't want to hold people up. So, as I keep saying, please click the follow presenter button so you can follow along with what I'm talking about. Don't stress if you haven't finished the exercise. We will leave the machines open for a period of time and we can have a follow-up discussion. So, the next thing that we need to talk about is transforming our data. Because there's over 500 transformers in FME, and you can perform an astonishing number of operations on your data to transform it in many different ways. Some of these are, so there's a whole heap of different ways, and some of these ways that you can transform your data are, but not limited to, restructuring, filtering, calculating your data, validating it to ensure high data quality, adjusting workflows to meet changing requirements. You can actually make your workflows dynamic in the sense that they can adjust with updating schemas, for example. There's lots of different ways that you can transform your data. And here's a sample of some of the categories of transformers. There are quite a few categories in FME, but this is some of the good starting points. You've got transformers like the attribute creator and expression evaluator, which are designed to change and modify, add or remove attributes, the individual columns. You have transformers like the attribute validator, which enforce validation rules. We also have ways of detecting changes in data and the ability to clean and fix errors. And we also have a wide variety of spatial analytic transformers that can answer questions such as, do my data sets overlap? What's the distance between my objects? What's the nearest object? What's the density? So on. Lots of different things you can do with these transformers. And so again, instead of just talking about it, I'd like to jump into the lab and actually show you. So now that we're talking about transformers, let's actually look at the transformers as part of lesson 6. And so what we have in our workflow, just to sort of run through these very quickly, I'm going to go through these transformers and give a very quick overview of what they are. So the first transformer that we have is the bufferer. This might be a bit rushed because we are just a little pressed for time. So we have the buffer transformer, and what this transformer actually does is it takes the incoming features and it buffers them out by a set distance around a central axis. Now, the features coming in are the roads, which are lines. So what you'll end up with is a polygon that effectively is the same, it follows the road, but it has a radius of the buffer distance. And so when this finished running, I'll show you what that looks like. And as I mentioned, if we want to look at any transformer, we can just double click on them to have a look at the parameters of that transformer. And for the bufferer, this one is actually not responding as well. There we go. This is actually buffering out by 30 feet. So this is a North American example. So we're working in Imperial here. That is 9.14 meters. And so what that does is it takes those roads and it makes them into areas instead. Now, why would we want to do that? Why would we want to take a line and make it a polygon? Well, the next thing that we do with them is that we actually want to do a spatial filter. The spatial filter transformer is a transformer that basically does some kind of spatial test on 2 different data streams. And the 2 data streams in this context are the road projects and the food vendors. And the test that we actually want to do is a food vendor within 30 feet of a road? And the easiest way to do that is to make the roads 30 feet wider, hence why the buffer is there. And then in the spatial filter, just like every other transformer, we can double click it, have a look in it, and go and have a look at what's in here. There's quite a few options. The one we're interested in is filter intersects candidate. What that says is that for every single set of features that comes in, it's going to test whether the food vendor intersects the road. And based on the results of that, it'll either go in the failed port or the true or the pass port. And so we actually have 4 food vendors in total that are within 30 feet of a road that's under construction. Therefore, these food vendors are impacted. The next transformer to talk about is the tester transformer, because one thing that we want to do with these 4 food vendors is that we want to actually append the business licenses information to enrich this data set. And so what we want to do is we want to take these business licenses and join them. But before we do that, we actually want to use a transformer called the tester to filter it down. And the test that we're doing is based on whether the actual license is valid as part of a certain year, so 2021 in this case, because this data set actually contains historic and expired licenses as well, which is not what we want. So we only want up-to-date current licenses. So that tester allows us to filter it down to the 62,000 current licenses and removes the 510,000 invalid licenses. And we have a transformer called a feature joiner. And what this feature joiner does is that it will actually take our food vendors and attempt to do a key-based join to the business licenses. So this is not geospatial like the spatial filter is. It's text-based. It's a key-based join, and it does a inner join. If you're familiar with SQL joins, there's a few options. You've got inner, left, or full. And it's trying to join the business name from the food vendors to the business trade name from the business licenses. And what you'll actually notice is that only 2 of them join. There's 2 that join and 2 that don't join. So for 2 of these, no valid business license is found. And what's the reason? Well, actually, it turns out that these 2 food vendors are out of business. And this actually it shows something interesting about this, something inverted that we've done, is we've actually performed a form of QA because we've removed food vendors that are out of business, that are not currently practicing. And we've done that by merging 2 data sets together. And then finally, we have this transformer here, the attribute manager. And the attribute manager is a bit of a jack of all trades when it comes to managing and changing attributes. What it will do is it will allow us to rename a whole heap of attributes to something a little more human friendly, human readable. And it also removes a whole heap of attributes we don't want. There are attributes that we either don't care about or that have been created by FME that we no longer need. And the attribute manager transformer is a single place that we can do all of this. And so to produce this output, these are just the transformers we need on top with the attribute validator. 6 transformers have allowed us to do this, something that I've got a Python and C+ background, would take me much longer to do in either one of those. And so when my instance responds again, what we can do, and I might just do this now because we're running out of time, I'll just quickly show how to do this lesson and people can come back to it if they want. What we can do is we can actually now take this output data set. So this data that we now know we want from our attribute manager, because we've filtered it spatially, we've joined the business licenses and we've cleaned up the schema. So this is our output, but it's not connected to the writer. We want to connect it to the writer. And so it's very, very easy to do that. All we need to do is literally go and select the existing connection from the writer and delete it. You can hit the delete key or you right click and click delete. And then you can go ahead and just drag it. And all you need to do is hover over the port, click your mouse and drag it to the writer. And that is all I need to do to now connect my writer to a different output and have a different schema and produce a different file. And all I need to do is click this run button again. And I have a different output now. And that output only contains the 2 vendors that are affected by the road construction. Very few blocks on a canvas to produce something that would take a whole lot longer in code. Okay, we are down to our last 5 minutes. So what we might do is we might very, very quickly talk about automation in FME server. I'll give a very quick overview of what you can do in FME server, and then I'll hand it over to Andrew to wrap up, and then we'll still go with that 15 minutes, and anyone who wants to ask any questions, you're more than welcome to. So automation of your workflows. Apologies about the cough. FME Server is your FME Server is a web enterprise tool that allows you to publish workflows that you design an FME desktop to deliver data in real time or on a schedule. So you can automate your workflows using event-based workflows. And these automations are actually really easily put together as part of a intuitive drag and drop interface as well, just like FME Workbench. And the key thing around FME Server is that it really eliminates the manual effort of complex and repetitive tasks. Set it and forget it effectively. Set it and forget it. And it's really easy to get started with FME Server and FME Desktop. FME Server and Desktop actually have a client-server relationship. So when you've finished a workflow in FME Desktop, you can literally publish it directly from desktop to FME Server. Once you've published it, it will be available to be run manually in FME Server or scheduled or automated. And you actually have permission-based sharing in FME Server as well. So you can hide it or expose it to particular users and groups, and you can integrate FME Server with your Active Directory as well. So if you want to actually leverage your existing AD groups to then start to control access to interfaces in FME Server, it's very handy like that. And the overall flow is just that. You work with FME Desktop, you publish to FME Server, and then once you're in FME Server, you will decide how you want to automate your workspace, whether it's scheduled, manually run, or event-based trigger, and then some end client, whether that is a person or the application that's doing the automation, then triggers it and the job's submitted and run. And the jobs that are submitted are run on what we call an engine. And for FME Server, there's two types of engines that you can go with. The licensing model for FME Server is very different to FME Desktop, where FME Desktop, you pay for that version of, you pay to use FME Desktop. For FME Server, you're actually paying for engines which run your jobs. And the two pricing models are standard engines, which are upfront cost and you can run as many jobs as you want, versus dynamic engines, which are a pay-as-you-go model. They're based on processing time. So if you have very infrequent jobs, these potentially have less cost. And FME Server can even go as far as actually giving you options to have custom web apps and public URLs where you can expose your workflows to the public and not even require authentication. So there's quite a lot you can do, and you can actually sort of do custom HTML or really easy out-of-the-box options to customize the appearance of these workflows as well. So there is an exercise, but we're going to omit it. Again, I'll be around for a while, so if you want to come back and do these lessons, feel free, and I'm here to help, but I'm just going to wrap up quickly considering we're coming up to 2 o'clock. As I mentioned, FME Server's got tools for automating workflows, and it's a interactive drag and drop thing where you can define triggers or schedules and you can invoke actions as a product of it. So things like directory watches, things like JMS, there's lots of different integration patterns that you can use in FME Server, and they just get deployed like this flow that you see on the screen. Another exercise, again, you'll be able to run through it if you so choose in these remaining 15 minutes. And the very last thing to mention about FME Server very quickly, and I do apologize we haven't enough time to go through it in full, is that FME Server also supports message streaming, so high capacity message streaming if you have that kind of requirement. It also scales very easily across multiple machines, and it supports parallelism and concurrency, so you can run things in tandem concurrently. And so that sort of wraps up our sections, our connect our data, our transform our data, and our automated data that we had to kind of blitz through automate data, sorry. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to quickly introduce Andrew again to give a very quick wrap up of our session. And then we will go into that remaining 15 minutes where anyone can ask me anything they want or jump into those lessons that unfortunately I've had to skip over. So I'll hand it.
Thank you very much, Sam. I guess everybody's wondering, okay, what's the next step? I've enjoyed working the accelerator session. I've got some hands-on experience. You probably want to continue that, and you can do that. You can do that through our training courses. So we run monthly training courses online. Sam is usually the trainer, so you have that direct interaction with a trainer. They're not pre-recorded, and we do that in 3 different levels on the desktop. We have the beginner's course, an intermediate, and for those people who are quite confident and experienced, we have the advanced course. We also have training courses for FME server. And the key one there is FME server authoring, which is all about publishing the workflows that you create on the desktop to the server so that they can be run automatically. We can also do custom courses for those organizations that want that, even on-site courses. We can also provide training license. We can provide licenses, trial licenses, so that you can have a month or so to actually get more hands-on experience. One thing I wanted to add is that we are running the One Spatial World Tour featuring FME, and we are running that across all the capital cities in Australia and in Singapore. Now, if you have questions of a technical nature, please contact us at support@onespatial.com. If you have any questions about getting hold of a license or purchasing a license, please contact us at sales.australia@onespatial.com. And we will be sending